name is A.R. Cavley. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'll be doing another not so short review today of Ironsworn Starforged by Sean Tompkin, because I need to show off my fancy Kickstarter product that finally came recently. It's been out for a while, so there are actually plenty of reviews on how to play it, but I wanted to wait until I had a physical copy to go over not only the rules a little bit, but also the product from the Kickstarter campaign. So speaking of the Kickstarter campaign, it was run pretty well. Sean was very good at his communication, very professional, seemed to be very on top of things. If there was an issue, then he was quick to explain the issue and what he was doing about it. So there was at no point where I thought, okay, this is not going to be fulfilled. There were things that were obviously out of his control, global shipping issues, things of that nature, which of course he couldn't do anything about. But I felt that he ran it competently and professionally, so that's always a plus. With Kickstarters, you never know. Um, currently, speaking of the physical product, currently you can only buy Starforged as the PDF. All right, which they're good PDFs. Don't get me wrong. They're fully bookmarked and linked and everything like that. But if you're looking for a physical copy, Sean has in various threads on Reddit and Discord and whatnot talked about the fact that he doesn't really want to do POD with this product for various reasons, and I think they're pretty good reasons. So the Kickstarter products were a offset print run, right? Basically, made enough to supply the backers. Now it looks like that they have teamed up with Modifius for future runs of the product. We can see, Modifius's name is already on the back. So they may have already had something to do with it. I'm not exactly sure about that part. But if you want to go and purchase the PDFs, you can go to ironswornrpg.com, and there's a section for Starforged. Now here is a sign up to be notified when it's ready, when you want to be notified when the physical edition is available again. If you click on that, it brings you over to modifius.com and a page they have for it. So maybe I'm reading too much into it, but it seems pretty reasonable to assume that they will be involved in future product runs. If you want to buy the PDFs, like it says right here, you can get, there's 3 links, you can get it from there. And there are, if you hit the buy now, it comes up with a window for that as well. I will be going over some of the excellent art in this book, but they have the printouts. If you want to take a longer look of the art of the book, it's here on this page. This is also the page where, well, not this page, but this is where you can get the sheets, this Starforged play kit, and I'll go over that briefly, what's included with that. It's a free download. You can print them out. All right, so with that intro done, and I'll go ahead and drop the links to those pages in the description below. So with that done, let's go ahead and take a look at our stuff. All right, so let's take a look at our product. We have our book, our main book. We have our asset deck, and we have a reference guidebook. We'll take a look at these later. The book itself, once you learn the book, it will actually kind of become the reference, because you can use the reference guide. It has all of the moves, the basic rules in it, the oracles. So instead of flipping through this to find things on a regular basis, you'll eventually flip over, start using that reference guide, and mostly referring to the book for extra details and questions if you want to look deeper into something. So starting off, we see that this is a pretty well made. It has saddle stitch binding. The pages are nice and thick. The inks are black and the colors are bright. So it's very well made, and it has two ribbon bookmarks built in, which is handy if you need to flip back and forth, say, between oracles and moves, and or just two different sections of the book. Two is better than one in this case. So the book itself, very very high quality. I'm no bookbinder or librarian, but I do have a lot of game books, and this one is very sturdy, put together very well. Next, we'll touch a little bit on the art here in the back. We see some more artist credits. They're also in the front, but if you want to see who actually did what, most of the work is Joshua Meehan, who did the color illustrations and the main layout. Nathan Gray, Sarah Dollinger, and Jeff Zugali. Pardon, Jeff, who did the spaceship. I'm not going to go and flip through all of the art because they're have all the pictures if you want to take a closer look and really get a good look at the art. You can see it on their webpage, on the ironswornrpg.com webpage. It has the art on there. Just in general, I will say that the art does an excellent job of presenting the setting. Not only is it technically skillful with a lot of attention to detail, it does an excellent job of expressing the wonder of exploring the forge. All right, there's a lot of pictures of alien vistas and ruins and rugged looking people marching across as they explore. It gives it's a large place, a lot of exploration, a lot of alien landscapes, a lot of alien ruins, and the occasional reminder that you are that your character is small beans, right, in a big picture. There's some pictures in here where you have a little guy, and beyond him is the distant horizon, or some huge giant fish who's going to eat you up from below, right? But a very expansive, gritty, and wondrous place to explore. The art is great in that regard. And here's something that I kind of found while I was getting ready to do my review. We see here our heroine on the cover, and presumably her ship there on the back. One, I love the fact that she has a saber, like a Hungarian or European type saber, instead of a simping, instead of simping for katanas, which is what most sci-fi swords tend to be. Someone simping for katanas, but sabers are excellent weapons. In fact, I've got one over my shoulder here that you may be able to spot when we cut back. But looking at her picture there, this move, we'll get into moves in a second. This move is about continuing a legacy, going back, making a new character after another has finished their journey one way or the other. And I see in this picture right here, there's that same hilt and guard. Gun looks a little different, but there's that ship. So it looks like either our heroine on the front either gave up the ghost or gave up the job. But I thought that was kind of a neat tie-in. And maybe I'm wrong reading too much into it, but it's kind of cool. Anyway, art is very excellent. The book itself is divided into 5 basic areas. And it has this content and safety. I'm not really myself, I don't really have a lot of use for safety cards or whatever, especially if you're doing a solo game. I am a big fan of talking to the GM and other players about issues, but I don't know, formalizing it. It's nothing not for me. Just say that. Okay, Iron Sworn, Starforged. There are 3 modes of play: guided, where you have a game master; cooperative, where you have 2, maybe 3 people who are working on the story together without a GM, kind of playing off of each other; and then solo. Now, I found myself that in my time playing Iron Sworn, that solo is really where the system shines. It works well enough as a guided system. I ran a Iron Sworn campaign with 3 players for a while, and it worked well enough. But after a while, the system tends to, I think, have a little more survivability and utility as a solo system. I'm not going to do a in-depth dive into the rules because there are other people who have done that better, who actually will go into play throughs and such. But the rule book itself is divided into the basics: creating your campaign. Chapter 3 has information on playing in depth. Well, like it says, gameplay in depth, best practices, stuff like that. And then the foes and encounters and the oracles. Tone and inspiration: Firefly, Dune, Battlestar Galactica, Star Wars. A lived-in, gritty kind of place. Here's our setting. NSC 8412 is the forge. It's a globular cluster above the Milky Way, where humanity fled. This is about the most detail you'll get because the game is designed for creating this as you play. So there's no, there's no map of empires or factions or anything like that. You're supposed to make those as you play. As in a recent exchange, NSC 8412, I asked Sean if that was an actual celestial body, and he said that it was not. He just used NSC as like New Stellar Catalog. But in my research, as it turns out, NSC actually stands for Nuclear Star Cluster. So it is actually a astronomical body, type of star cluster. Everyone starts in the Exodus fleet stopped at Terminus, and each ring out from Terminus is less and less populated. In general, the mechanics and the fictions work together. The mechanics are described as framing the fiction. So you envision the situation or the scene. You take an action, and this is going to be covered mostly by the moves, which will involve rolling some dice. And then you take that output, that result, and apply it to the fiction and use it to determine what happens next. Here it talks about envisioning things, and that is important because that is how you see things. That's how you tell your story, and it does help work the fiction. Iron vows. For people of the Forge, an iron vow is sacred. When you hold a piece of iron and declare your solemn promise to serve or aid someone or to complete a personal quest, your honor is bound to that vow. Those who undertake these sworn quests are called ironsworn. Abandoning or recanting an iron vow is the worst sort of failure. As a mechanical function, these vows help start you on your way. Right? They help give you direction. But to me, they seem very out of place in a science fiction setting without some other underlying philosophical or religious reason, because you can play scoundrels, right? You can play smugglers and thieves, and I just don't really see them as being the type of people who would take some kind of ceremonial iron vow. And it says for the people of the Forge, so does everyone make iron vows? Are iron vows common? In Iron Sworn, they made a little more sense with the setting because of the culture. A primitive culture with a largely warrior mentality where honor did mean everything. In a modern or science fiction type setting, without some other kind of reason, I think that kind of idea would largely be scorned. And in Iron Sworn, not only did you have the primitive culture, it was hinted that Iron Sworn were prophesied somehow to be Iron Sworn. So to me, the vows just seem a little out of place in this. Is Han Solo going to make an iron vow to Jabba the Hutt? That kind of stuff. It doesn't fit, at least in my opinion. Still going to use them or come up with a reason, but it just seems odd. All right, so Iron Sworn. These are some fundamental ideas about your character. You're driven, you're a spacer, you're competent, you're imperfect, and you're unbound. A lot of things in this game are based on narrative. So when it talks about you can work with NPCs, you can work with people that aren't direct assets. We'll talk about assets here in a minute. But they mostly work into the narrative. They don't things don't provide mechanical advantage in most cases. All right. Moves in Ironsworn in Starforged, every action that you can do is sort of subsumed into a set of moves. Okay. If you say you're going to try to sneak somewhere or you're going to try to investigate an area, each one of those fits into a move. When you make the move, you roll, and the move will have your outcomes and what happens. Our reference guide here has an A to Z list of the moves. That's a lot of moves. To me, I feel really there's almost too many moves. I have a hard time keeping track of and sometimes figuring out which is which. Now, it's not completely overwhelming because when you are in a certain situation, you're really only going to pick from a handful of moves, right? If you're adventuring, you're going to be using adventure moves. All right. If you're in combat, you're going to be using combat moves. But sometimes there's a lot to try to keep track of for me. And to be honest, I think sometimes these moves, I'm not really a fan of them. They're a good mechanic. They can be fun. They do allow certain mechanical outcomes based on the moves. But sometimes I think the moves could easily be replaced with, just making attribute rolls, like in a minimalist setting. Some of them are fairly specific, but like for combat moves or for exploration moves, just make a wits test or a edge test. Doing solo, it's not so bad because you can just look them up and find everything. But every move I do, I always have to look it up because there's no way I'm going to remember all of the different outcomes. So, uh, and especially since they they threw in the session moves as moves, I can kind of get what they were going for, but there's enough moves already, and all those session moves are, do you really need a session move to go to the bathroom? I don't know. It does fit with the overall because moves are a central mechanic to this game and to other powered by the apocalypse type games. But I find that I'm constantly having to look up everything, like gather information. I can't just roll a wits roll and find out if I found something or not. If I'm going to play as written, I have to flip over to find that, determine if I have to make another roll. Solo, it's not so bad, but it can drag things out if you're playing with a group. But that's what the moves are. Right. I say that, and I don't want to sound like I'm too much of a hater because the moves do allow you to do a lot of cool things. But there's 52 moves. That's a lot of moves for that. That's more times than I've been around the sun, and I've been around the sun a couple times. All right, so the basic game mechanic is there's no static target numbers. You roll 1 die 6 and you add the appropriate stat, which sometimes you may be able to pick it and sometimes you may be told what it is depending on what the situation is. You know, if you're going to do something, you're going to try to get through the complex using speed, then you would use edge. If you're trying to sneak through, then you'd use shadow. And then adds, depending on your assets, you may get a bonus to that roll, and then you come up with an action score. All right. And then while you roll the 1 die 6, you roll 2 challenge dice, and you have to beat those. If you beat both of them, you get a strong hit. If you beat one, it's a weak hit, and if you don't beat either one, it's a miss. And you'll be getting a lot of weak hits and misses. I have never played a game where my 30-year-old dice have backstabbed me so much. Oh yeah, now you're gonna roll good. But those guys, they kill me. They love killing me. And then you resolve the outcome based on what the move tells you. If you roll matches, those are kind of like, thinking of them as critical hits and misses is not quite accurate, but they do present either extreme opportunities or extreme perils that might be introduced into the scene. The momentum mechanic, you build momentum up, and what it does basically is it allows you certain moves and actions slowly builds your momentum. When you burn your momentum, it resets, and then you replace that number, whatever your momentum number is, up to 10. You replace it, or you replace your action score, your total score, not just the dice, but your total score with that. And that can save your bacon, allow you to do cool power moves. I always think of it as one of those Japanese RPGs where you're saving up for your power break, and then you unleash your Hadouken or whatever, and then it resets. Every challenge, this is something that I like. Every challenge is represented by 10 boxes. They're a progress track, and as you have successes, you fill that up. When it gets to a certain part, you mark your progress, you fill it up based on the threat level assigned to the challenge. This is also how you would, because gear is largely narrative, you know, if you're wearing super armor or whatever, it doesn't grant you any bonuses. You know, there's an asset that does if you have that asset, but just wearing armor doesn't grant you mechanical bonuses on the dice. Instead, things like that, if you like having better weapons than the opponent or better armor that would reasonably give you a better chance of winning the fight, changes the threat level, the challenge level. So somebody who's a super trooper, they've got the armor, they've got, you know, some kind of plasma rifle or whatever. A band of poorly equipped starving bandits, are they're just going to be troublesome, and so it'll be easy to fill up that progress track. Now that same band of desperate bandits, they may be formidable to, say, a field researcher. You know, maybe they've got a little stunner and a notebook, and that's what they're having to fight off. So I've not tried it, but I imagine you could probably, if you're playing with a group, you could probably, one person, they would share the same track as a challenge for the whole group. And so every person, if you're playing with a group, shares that same track. If you were playing somebody, you know, if you were fighting those bandits and you had the super trooper and the field researcher, one one might treat them as troublesome, the other might treat them as formidable in the same battle. That's not stated anywhere in here. It's just something I was thinking about the other day. Progress rolls. As you fill up the progress track, you don't actually have to fill it all the way up. What you do is when you want to, what it calls take decisive action, which is basically you want to finish things up, right? You want to be done. You want to take over the bunker. You want to blow up the enemy starship. Uh, you want to get to the top of the mountain. Whatever the track is concerning, you roll 2 challenge dice against your progress score. All right. Now this allows an interesting kind of push your luck choice. So if maybe your guys are really getting to the end of their rope, they're running out of their resources, their health is low, their spirit's low, they're running out. They don't know how much more damage or whatever they can take. They can try to push their luck and finish this very quickly. And you can actually set it up to where you could get somebody with a single shot. Um, make one good combat roll, and then your next action be to take decisive action. Now, if you fail, there are some pretty bad consequences, because if you get a complete miss, that means you've lost the fight. It doesn't mean you're blown up or whatever, but you've lost that objective. You've lost the fight. On a weak hit, you've won, but there's a price to be paid for it. Maybe you've got what you want. Maybe you took the bunker, but now there's some reinforcements. Or maybe it's not the bunker. Maybe the princess is in a different castle. All right. And legacy tracks. This is a big improvement, in my opinion, over how Iron Sworn did XP, did experience points, in that everything was tied to those vows, right? You could do something else completely brave, completely awesome, and go months on end up on some kind of side quest. But if there wasn't a vow, it didn't count. You didn't get experience points. It had to be associated with a vow. Now, of course, I house ruled that, but here Starforged uses legacy tracks so that your experience is built up in different ways. You have quests, bonds, and discoveries. These are all ways that you can grow in experience. It's more holistic, and in my mind, it gives you a wider variety of options, to not just for experience, but also for character development. Right? You can build up and develop your character by making discoveries and by making bonds, by making friends and influencing people. And then you spend your experience. Every time you fill in one of the boxes, you spend your experience. 2 experience points will let you increase an asset, and 3 will let you buy a new asset. When you make your character, you have an array that you apply to your stats: edge, heart, iron, shadow, and wits. And this is the array: 1 3, 2 2s, and 2 1s. This is how you pick your character's strengths. You have a health, spirit, and supply meters, which go up and down as the adventure carries on. Health is your physical, spirit is your mental state. It could just be stress. You could use it as like a insanity, if like Cthulhu kind of thing. The monsters, the cosmic horrors scare you to death. I really like that. I like that picture. And supplies the same way, because the game does not really worry about keeping track of specific equipment, you have a supply attribute and a move to check your supplies if you wanted to see if you had something specific. And as you spend supply, the lower the supply, the harder it gets to feed yourself, use um, to see if you have maybe that grappling hook or whatever. Asset condition meters. The assets also have condition meters. As your health, your status meters go down, you can have misfortunes, which means like if you're wounded, you go down to 0 health. Now you don't immediately die. There are, of course, moves that you make to see what happens. But one of the things that can happen, you can be wounded. While you're wounded, you can't heal until you get your wound treated. If you're shaken, you can't get spirit back until you have some kind of what it calls heartening, until you get some kind of comfort back. And unprepared, you can't you can't spend any resources or sacrifice resources um, until you spend some time resupplying yourself, getting yourself back. Okay. Basically, you cannot if you have those misfortunes set, you can't increase those status bars. And the same thing with your vehicles. If you have vehicles, they can get battered, they can have permanent troubles. Your main ship, if it gets to the point where it should have been blown up, then it's never quite the same. This here is a representation of my 1972 Ford Pinto in spaceship form. Hopefully I didn't say that in another part because I'd be repeating my joke, and that's always embarrassing. But I love that Pinto. Okay, now these are those temporary effects, those temporary impacts can turn into lasting effects. All right, burdens, they are basically effects that you get if you come back from the brink where you should have died, you should have given up, but at the last second you made a roll. All right, the lasting effects, these are when you really get hurt. Basically, you are permanently crippled, or you're permanently maimed, or you're permanently traumatized. This is permanently harmed. I think maimed probably sounds better. I don't know, maybe that's ableist or something of maimed, but I think that's what Ironsworn used. But if you're maimed or traumatized, then that condition stays with you. And these burdens and impacts, they have the effect of limiting your momentum. Right? When you reset, you go to a lower level. Your maximum is reduced by each impact. So it's basically the mechanical effects of these narrative impacts on you. All right, now we get to our assets. When you make your character, you assign your array, you come up with your background, you think about who you are, you can roll your name. There's a lot of character oracles. But you select a certain number of assets when you start. You start with a starship. Everyone's assumed to start with a starship. Although you don't have to. You could have a campaign where maybe gaining that starship is your inciting incident. But you start with a starship and 2 paths. And then when you work all that stuff out, you're able to select one final asset. And the assets are command vehicle modules, which are things that add on to your command vehicle, support vehicles, which are smaller vehicles like shuttles or fighters, all-terrain vehicles that you own that allow you to, well, to use them, right? If you're if you have a fighter, you're able to go up and do dogfighting. If you have an all-terrain vehicle, it helps you travel rough terrain. Paths, which are like skill sets basically, or abilities. Companions, which are allies, they're NPCs, and they actually do help you. Their narrative, and they can give you a mechanical advantage. There's animals, bots, and you can even have a sidekick. And deeds, those are assets that you earn later on, like the uh, like noble titles or the permission to homestead. Okay. And I tell you what, this might be a good time to we'll go ahead and take a look at our asset cards. Now, when you first get the asset cards, just a little something. You see, I kind of ripped it there, not from initially, but from later on. The cards are in the box very tight. So the first time that I opened them up, I actually had to kind of fit a knife blade or something underneath there and open that up. Yeah, that can stay there for now. These are your asset cards. It also has a couple info cards, some reference cards. They're marked on the back as to what kind of card they are. Paths, modules, companions, and they also have different colored planets. And these cards, they are dry erase capable. I looked around, actually did a little research to see if they were technically, because it never mentions that they are anywhere. And I found I think maybe a Reddit post from Sean Tompkin talking about it. And they're designed to be used with dry erase markers, but because of some timelines and restrictions that where he had to get some stuff off, he had tried to test it to make sure that the ink, the dry erase ink wouldn't permanently stain. So basically, you can use dry erase markers on these. All right. But because he couldn't 100% guarantee that they would, that they would work as advertised, he decided not to mark it down as a feature, if you will. But when you have a feature, here we'll use Sleuth, or an asset, it starts with a default ability. All right. And this one, Sleuth, when you swear an iron vow to solve a murder, disappearance, or theft. And it goes on to explain what mechanical advantage, as well as narrative, but your mechanical advantage. When you spend experience points, you can upgrade by marking off another one of these. Okay, one at a time. So this one, say you wanted to upgrade your Sleuth, you mark this, you fill this hex in. When you make a move to avoid detection, as you put a person or place under surveillance, take +1 and take +1 momentum on a hit. All right, and you can do that with all of them, or like I said, you can buy you can buy more assets. Buying more assets, you want to make sure that they meet the narration if possible, just because it makes a better story. And all right, so that's pretty much the rules and character creation. There's our Ornthor ship again. And when I talked about the fact that you make the forge as you play, this is a section where that starts. It describes how you travel. You're faster than light, drifts, passages, things like that. And in this section, it tells you about how to populate the sectors, how to make the sectors. Okay, here's a good flow chart of using the rules. You make your decisions, focus on the fiction, and then go back around. Prep is play. I like that idea. Here's one of those pictures where you got the little guy and he is on a world that extends out to the horizon. Got this, these big landing pads and ships, and he's little guy right there. I like another good example of how the art really fits the setting. But prep is play. As you're coming up with things, as you're making your character, as you're determining factions and building star systems, that's all play. Safety tools. And this is probably one of my favorite parts. It's a very interesting part of the campaign. You have these default assumptions when you're envisioning what the world looks like. It's perilous, it's lonely, it's diverse, it's far flung, it's unexplored, which is, I like exploration, is one of my favorite kind of sci-fi campaigns, so I like that. It's wondrous, it's retro future, so think about like 80s and 90s sci-fi. It's unjust and it's hopeful, so it's a gritty, grimy place, but there are opportunities and there is hope. Now, each one of these are what it calls campaign truths. And I'm not going to go through all of them, but these are the base assumptions, the history basically of the Forge. And it's useful for, of course, to know where you're going. It's helpful to know where you've been. And the categories are the cataclysm, which is why humanity fled, the exodus, what the trip through the escape looked like, communities, what communities look like now, the role of Iron Sworn and Black Iron, laws and government, religion, magic, communication and data, medicine, artificial intelligence, war, life in the Forge, precursors, and horrors. Now you can, as it says here, you can choose it, you can roll, or you can customize your own. I'll just go through the cataclysm, but each one has, you roll percentages if you're doing the dice, and it gives 3 larger ideas, and then each one has an oracle underneath it to where you can specify. And each one also has kind of a cool a hook that you can use in your campaign at some point. There's another pretty cool picture. I like those ships. The people getting nuked probably don't like those ships, but they look pretty cool. And you can add to these, you can make them up however you want to. I mean, you could take the truths of your favorite fictional universe, Battlestar Galactica or something, and translate them to these truths. In fact, you wouldn't even really have to translate them officially or whatever. You just, use them. Like here for magic, magic does not exist. There is some, and there's a bunch. Basically, kind of how that boils down. Medicine, the medicine is all retro. There's a picture back there. They're still using prosthetics. Right. But that's a pretty fun exercise to run through, kind of deciding these big questions. And then you create your character going through the things as we've already covered here. There's some oracles for creating your backstory if you want. Make your background vow. Background vow is like your ultimate goal. You don't have to even do that right away. And then your final assets, and then gear. Everyone's assumed to have this spacer kit. and the personal items that you would need. Like if you're a hunter, you probably have a hunting rifle and maybe some traps. If you're a pilot, you know, you've got a flight suit, helmet, computer, or whatever. Now this is how you build the forge. You create a sector. You as part of creation of or as part of creating the campaign, you start a sector in this way. As you go to other sectors, the creation is similar, but this one's a little more streamlined and guided to get things going. And it's pretty simple. There are oracles for stellar objects, the planets, and the type of settlements. You fill out the sheet, you mark them pretty much wherever you want to go. You create passages. These are the known ways back and forth. So you have some places you can go to easily. And then you have one place that you will have to make a different move that makes it a little more difficult. You have to figure out your own way to get there. And then you zoom in on the settlement and you can generate a settlement trouble. Use it as a inspiration to get started. And then somewhere in this sector, you also make a connection. You know, just a random connection, or you could, I mean, you could make it a one that fits your fiction better, but there are oracles in the back. And this is somebody that you have a connection with already. Someone you can maybe help you with your inciting incident, someone you can tap into. And here's a sample starting sector. All right. And then you begin the adventure. And it gives you some ideas for how to set the scene, your initial vows, and your next steps. Okay. Now, chapter 3, this describes, you know, how to the 3 pillars of play. You do quests, you create connections, and you make discoveries. Discoveries come up when you do certain exploration moves. And like I said, I don't really I don't really care so much for these session moves, but beginning the session, I do like this one. If your characters aren't in the middle, if your character's not in the middle of something, maybe needs a little boot in the spacesuit, or you need a little, you know, direction or inspiration. Here's an oracle to help with that. So that one is interesting, but you know, setting flags, changing fate, take a break. That's just stuff you do. When you endure harm or stress, you decide whether it's minor, serious, or major. And when you take these, you have a choice. You can try to resist it, which might help you or make it worse for you. Or you can just take your lumps and move on. So that makes it kind of an interesting choice. It can be kind of a push your luck mechanic. You can try to, if your health is 0 or whatever you've been knocked down, is similar to whether you're enduring harm or losing supply or endure stress. If it's down to 0, then excess damage starts affecting other tracks, usually momentum. So if you're out of health, then you take some more damage. The carryover is subtracted from your momentum. And if things get real bad, you can accept one of those impacts, or you can push your luck and roll on the oracle, which can kill you or leave you standing. All right, here's a section on tension clocks. You can add them as things count down. You start filling in the clock, and that could be, a virus is spreading, an invasion fleet is coming, the parasite is crawling its way through your body to your heart, whatever. Okay. Here's some good principles. Throughout the book, there are a couple sections on best practices. I think going back to 3, it's easy to beat yourself up, and not every failure results in you getting incinerated. Right? It could be that you flee and are embarrassed, or that you have to suffer some kind of other social issues, right? Instead of you getting killed, you're seen as a coward, or you escape, but now they want to hunt you down and finish the job. Uh, it can be easy, and a lot of people have that trouble to where they get started, because the most logical thing, if you're in a gunfight or you're being attacked by some kind of xenomorph, the most reasonable thing is that if you lose, that you get bitten, right? But instead, it could be that you're freaked out, that you're scared, that you run away in terror. The point being that you don't necessarily want to kill your main character every time they lose a fight or lose a challenge. Now, I'm definitely for PCs getting killed, right, as a GM and as a solo player, but not needlessly, not well, sometimes if they do something foolish or the dice go the wrong way, but not always. Be gentle with yourself. Think of it more as a story. How could he have been defeated but come back to fight another day? I think there's our Ornither. Yep. One thing that I do love about narrative type games uh, is the simple NPC blocks. All right, so we have in this section, it talks about our NPC components here. They're marked with, this is their challenge rank. All right, and there are a handful with some good art for some of them. Like right here, this chitin. It is basically your alien, right? It's an arachnid monster with blade limbs and dripping mucus, and it's your alien bug. By itself, a single one is a is that dangerous? I always forget and you don't even really need to remember them, but 2 is a dangerous, and if there's a drone, then that bumps it up to formidable, and the queen is extreme. All right, so within those, which within the NPCs, there are different modifications or different types, leaders or heroes or whatever, that have a different difficulty, a different challenge rating. But one of the things that I like about Ironsworn, Starforged, is that it's the monster stat block is not there. All right, I play games, and even though, like I said, I don't mind crunching numbers sometimes, but you look at a stat block and there's all these numbers and all this information. But I like seeing this. This is what they look like. This is what they're trying to do, what they want to do, and then these are their tactics. No bonuses or anything like that. This is what this is how they're going to act in combat or in whatever the conflict's going to be. One thing I'll add that I probably should have added back there is that Ironforged is, well, kind of by necessity, it's a player-facing game, right? So it's designed to be solo, so you don't have like saying in a combat situation, your character doesn't roll to hit, and then the other guy, the NPC you're fighting, doesn't roll back, and you exchange rolls. you make a combat move, and if you succeed, you hit them, and if you don't, they hit you. And these are the type of attacks that they will do. It's a good narrative tool to describe what they're doing or what it looked like maybe when you failed your roll. Scrap bandits. And human NPCs are the same way. There's oracles that you roll to see what they want to do. All right, so I like the NPC sections, good. And this part of the book, this is the oracles chapter. I'm not going to go through all of the oracles, but there are a lot of oracles. They're great for inspiring adventures and coming up with interesting twists in characters. Again, if you see that arrow, that means it's directing you to a different oracle for some more details. Character names, factions. Factions are an important part of the setting, or can be an important part of the setting. This is how you generate them. Some oracles for that. And in the back here, there's an oracle for even for those combat actions, what the bad guys might do. And then finally, I think we'll finish up with our review by going over derelicts, themed areas, and the vaults. And these are all oracles to generate places to explore. Derelicts are like abandoned starships. They could be abandoned mines, research complexes, could be alien ruins of some kind. And as you go through, you generate what that area looks like. Then you generate the features. When you're walking through, what do you find? What do you find? And then you play. You decide, is there anything interesting going on in there? Use an oracle. Is there danger ahead? All right, same with the precursor vaults. You have different areas that you're supposed to eventually in to get to the center. These are left by ancient, well, precursors, the people before us, and that's one of the truths that is generated. And then location themes. This is essentially if you're familiar with Ironsworn Delve, this is essentially it. You find a location. You can use this for any of the locations inside what you found. You can use it for, say, you just want to explore the surface of a planet. You can do the same thing. You just come up with an area, do a theme, and then each one of those has its features. Theme, feature, theme, feature. And then you have a couple miscellaneous oracles at the end. Now there's that combat action. This is what they do. It doesn't necessarily have a mechanical effect, mostly narrative. But sometimes what I like to do, the moves are a little different in this, but every now and then, especially playing as a GM, every now and then, and just throw in that the NPC does something and then roll on the combat action table and then make all the characters, depending on whether they're, in control or in a bad spot, make them roll just to avoid any damage, to avoid the attack. Just to throw it in there, increase some pressure, increase the narration a little so that it's not just, okay, I'm rolling to clash, I'm rolling to clash, I'm rolling to attack, rolling to clash. I like to just occasionally throw in, hey, he's laying down a huge area of laser fire. Everybody roll to, get out of the way. And that is the end of our physical review. Let's take a quick look at our Starforged play kit. This comes in PDF form and has our move reference sheets, character sheets, sector worksheets. It does have some of the same information that you'll find in the reference guide. If you have the reference guide, then obviously you don't really need to fool with this. But maybe if you want to just print it out as is, use it as a fold up, it's an option for you. But this is where you'll find your character sheet, name, characteristics. Here's where you print out the sector map and connections. These are for the connections, because when you create a connection, you assign them, how hard is it to make a connection with them, more risk, more reward kind of thing. And then here's a sheet for all of your challenges, whether it's a combat, whether it's a trip somewhere. And then if you want to make your own oracles, clocks, so that's what's in there. All right, so that is the physical product. In summary, I will say that I am very happy to have Ironsworn Starforged in my library. It's an excellent product. It's an excellent game. I like the setup it uses for playing solo, and the oracles that provide interesting and diverse characters and landscapes, sites to explore. And I've already started my own campaign, and maybe I'll make videos of it as I play along through it as well. I realize that most people watching this probably already have the Starforged game, but if you're one of those who are thinking about getting it, or at some future date thinking whether or not you want to get the physical copies, hopefully this will help you in that decision. Thank you for following along as I rambled in my review, and happy gaming.